Well, one of the least surprising announcements in recent Browns history. Joe Flacco will be the starting quarterback. The question is, how long for? Hey guys, welcome back to my channel, or if you are new here, then please do me a favour and hit that subscribe button. So, Joe Flacco will be the Cleveland Browns starting quarterback for 2025. Not going to lie, I sat down to record 2 other videos and this news just came through. Obviously, going to try and get this one out first as it is breaking news, shall we say. I actually thought this would come tomorrow when Kevin spoke to the media, but the team decided to announce it via social media, put out a post to announce it. So Joe Flacco is the starting quarterback. What does that mean for him? What does that mean for the Browns? What does that mean for the other guys? First and foremost, of course, I think everyone and their nan expected this to be what the quarterback was going to be. At this point in training camp after the preseason games, Joe Flacco didn't play in either preseason game, not because he wasn't injured. He was actually one of the only quarterback that hasn't been injured in that room, other than Tyler Huntley, who they brought in. So he didn't play in any of those games like any of the other starters. He's had a strong camp. He's had strong joint practices against the Eagles by all reports, both Browns and Eagles reporters. They said he looked like the best Browns quarterback out there. He got most of the first team reps. All things pointed towards Joe Flacco being the starter, being the guy that they announced as the starter, and we now have it officially. It will be Joe. So, what does that mean? I think it gives you the best chance to win straight away. I said this when this quarterback battle started, shall we say, that, although I think they wanted to give Kenny Pickett every chance that he could have to win this job and be the starter, and while I thought, that was probably the best case scenario as well, just given Joe's age, I did say that if they believe Joe gives them the best chance to win, then they will go with Joe, and he's obviously been good enough in camp. They feel good enough at other areas across the team that they feel like they can win with Joe. They, with this defense, with some of the weapons, how some of the rookies have come along and looked strong. I think they're probably, I feel better about this team now than I did, shall we say, 6 months ago, 8 months ago, and I think the Browns, front office and coaching staff probably feel the same. And at this point, not saying they're going to go and win 12 games and make the playoffs, but with a deep top 5, potentially top 5 defense, and some of these other guys stepping up, Joe Flacco arguably gives you, not arguably, I would say, definitively gives you the best chance to win, and the best chance to win games, especially early. When you look at the Browns' schedule, you look at those first 6 games. That's a tough stretch of games, and Joe Flacco, with the experience that he has, gives you the best chance, in my opinion, to win in those first 6 games. Will it last longer than those first 6 games? I suppose that is the question, with, of course, everyone else, in this room. But, we'll have to wait and see. But, Joe hasn't started more than, 9 games since 2017. The last time he started a full season was, of course, 2017 for Baltimore, before he was benched halfway through the 2018 season for Lamar Jackson. And, since then, 8 games in 2019, 5 games in 2020, 2 games in 2021, 5 games in 2022. Of course, the 5 games for the Browns in the regular season and the playoff game, another game in the playoffs to make it 6, and then 8 games last year for the Colts, which included 6 starts. So, I don't think it's a guarantee, shall we say, that Joe Flacco is going to start all 17 games. But if you do get Joe Flacco for all 17 games, if you do get some resemblance of Joe Flacco, when he was here in 2023 for 17 games, don't get me wrong, it will be a wild ride, and the defense will surely have to hold up and, help this team out with what will probably be quite a few turnovers. But that will give the Browns probably the best chance to win, in my opinion. Just as these kind of guys are you know, how ready they are, how much experience they have. Joe Flacco's 40 years old. He's been around the league. He's been around the bush. So, if he can play to that level across 17 games, which it is unlikely if we're being honest, that does give you the best chance to win. So that is why he has been announced as the week 1 starter and the starter going forward. You don't announce him as the week 1 starter and then think, we're going to just pull him after 4 games. Maybe you do that when you have a rookie that you're confident enough to come in at that point, and that's something that I've spoken about in the off season as well. That this was always between Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. Even if one of the two rookies showed enough and in this quarterback battle to make this coaching staff confident that they are even confident enough to believe that they're the starter long term. They were never going to start week 1, and they probably weren't going to start at least a few more weeks after that as well. Just given how tough this schedule is. This isn't a number 1 overall pick, someone you have to put out there just because of the semantics around it and the optics and everything like that. This is a 3rd and a 5th round pick. You don't need to rush these guys in there. So, even if Dylan or Shedeur showed this coaching staff that they're the guy, they were never going to start week 1. It was always between Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett. As I said, I thought they were going to give Kenny Pickett every chance to win this job. 4 months ago, 5 months ago, when they signed him, whatever it was at that point, you'd argue that things probably looked a little bit bleaker for the 2025 Cleveland Browns. What to do at that quarterback position. Do you start a Joe Flacco and, yes, maybe have some fun, but probably lose a bunch of games? Or do you start a Kenny Pickett, someone that, yes, unlikely, but could potentially show you something and offer you something that year and going forward, given the fact that he's not 40 years old. He's still on his rookie contract. So that's what you thought then. And then, of course, the draft came around. They drafted these 2 guys, and that obviously threw two wrenches into the kind of idea and stuff like that. I wasn't someone that was against drafting 2 quarterbacks. Don't get me wrong. I didn't even mention that they would draft 2 quarterbacks before the draft, as I didn't think that they would. But they did, and I wasn't against it. But of course, it made the quarterback competition, more interesting, shall we say, and probably least likely for a chance that if Joe Flacco or Kenny Pickett, whichever one lost the job after they drafted 2 quarterbacks, was probably then going to become the one to be the most likely to, if they were to cut or trade someone. I did it. One of the videos I did on the quarterbacks, and kind of, I think a month or so ago now, where I kind of talked about my view on who I think will start at that point. I kind of mentioned then that, Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett were the most likely to start, but those 2 were also the most likely to not be on the 53-man roster, over a Shedeur Sanders and a Dylan Gabriel. I felt that, Shedeur Sanders and Dylan Gabriel weren't competing for a roster, but everyone's competing for a roster spot, shall we say? But they were competing for that 3rd and 2nd initially, quarterback spot. And if a Kenny Pickett and a Joe Flacco, one of them wins the quarterback 1 spot, what do you do with the other one? That's why it was more likely that one of them, whoever didn't win the job, would be the one that's going to be cut or traded. So that obviously then, of course, goes to Kenny Pickett now. Joe Flacco has been announced the starter, so what are they going to do with Kenny Pickett? I've said all along they could realistically keep 4 quarterbacks. They still might. But at this point, with Joe Flacco winning the job, and with Joe Flacco probably more than likely not going to start the whole season, just given the fact that he hasn't done that since 2017. If it does get to that point, would you rather throw Kenny Pickett in there, or would you rather throw one of those rookies in there? Pardon me. It's one of those where, from a winning perspective, you'd probably argue maybe Kenny Pickett. You'd feel more confident, shall we say? Well, I know a lot of people wouldn't, but the Browns coaching staff would feel more confident putting someone in there that has to come in as injury relief, or has to come and start a game that's started in the NFL and has won games in the NFL over a rookie. But for me personally, I would rather just, if it does get to that point where Joe Flacco is either benched because he's injured or he's bad, I'd rather just go to the 2 rookies at that point. So Kenny does probably become the odd man out. Kevin did have some comments the other day when asked about would he keep four quarterbacks, and that was probably the least convincing he's ever sounded during this process of keeping four. So, maybe that is becoming more and more less likely. So, obviously keep your eyes out for a Kenny Pickett trade. I think a trade is going to be a lot more. I don't think they're going to cut him. I think they would definitely be able to get a 6th or 7th round pick off someone, whether it's a Saints or any team really. I think they could get at least a 6th or a 7th round pick. So I don't think they cut him. I think they do trade him if that is what they do, and that is what I would do at this point. Yes, at first I argued that Kenny should probably get a better look than Joe Flacco, just given where this team was at, given his age and everything like that. But now that Joe Flacco has convincingly won this job and deservedly won this job, and yes, it's unfair for Kenny Pickett. He got an injury, and that's obviously thrown a massive spanner in it for him. And it's a shame. And do I think that he would have had again much better chance to win this job if that injury didn't happen? I do. But unfortunately, that's the NFL, and that's what happened. Joe Flacco, took advantage of that, played really well. Again, played really well in the joint practices, and just showed enough to be the starter. And he's won that job. So at this point, I know there's no need to carry 4 quarterbacks into the season. So if I had my preference, I would trade Kenny Pickett, and that wouldn't just be good for the Browns. That would be good for Kenny Pickett as well, and he can go and hopefully maybe start some games this year for someone, and we can see what he can do. But Joe Flacco is, of course, the starter. I'm somewhat excited for that, shall we say? I am excited. It's going to be at least an experience. I do think it gives them the best chance to win. But I would, of course, be lying if I didn't sit here and say I would like one of these rookies to eventually come in and take the job off Joe Flacco, and hopefully be good. But otherwise, at least we get to see and get a look at these 2 rookies. They haven't got a lot of time. They've got 1 year. The Browns have got 2 first-round picks next year, so they're again 3rd and 5th round pick. There's not a lot of investment in those players, shall we say. 3rd and 5th round picks get traded all the time. So these guys haven't got long to show that they could potentially be the long-term starters or maybe long-term backups or whatever. They haven't got that much of a chance. So Joe Flacco, I'm excited to, of course, and I think week 1 definitely I would have picked Joe Flacco to start over everyone, but just gives you the best chance to go and beat a Bengals team that usually is unprepared in week 1. Joe Flacco is, if anything, he's going to be prepared. He's going to, the experience that he has. So, of course, excited for that. Hope Joe Flacco, if he does go and play 17 games and leads the Browns to the playoffs and throws for 4,000 yards, then, I'll be there. I'll be there on my knees, arms out, praising him and, just, and everything, singing everything and Flacco fever and all of that stuff, of course. But just, right now, a couple of weeks out from the season with what we've seen from the rookies, the encouraging stuff that I've seen from these rookies, I would be lying if I sat here and said that, I wouldn't want to see both of these guys get games this year. But Joe Flacco is the starter. That's how it's going to go from at least week 1. We'll, of course, see so many things can happen in the NFL. Injuries are so frequent in the NFL. So touch wood, of course, it doesn't get to anything like that. And, you never want to see someone come in because of an injury. Only want to see that if they just naturally beat them out. But let me know what you guys think. Are you happy about Joe Flacco being the starter? I think most people probably are. But let me know if you are. Let me know if you're not. And if you're not, let me know why. But I'm going to go on to the other 2 videos that I had planned to probably going to release all of them today. I suppose I might as well. But, we now know the starting quarterback. We now pretty much know the bones of this offense and what it's going to look like week 1. So we've got so much to talk about over the next few weeks leading into the season. So Cannot wait, and I hope you guys can't wait either. But that will do it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. If you do enjoy my content, then please drop this video a like, hit that subscribe button. It's free, but it really helps out my channel. You can also check the links in the description to see where you can follow and interact with me on social media. As I always say, I'm trying to build a community of Cleveland Browns fans, and even if that means I only get to talk to one fan a day, I'm happy because I'm talking Browns football with the best fan base in the world. Thanks again for watching, guys. Have an amazing week. Flacco fever, enjoy it. But most importantly, go Browns.